Have you ever been called weird just because you'd rather stay home on a Friday night than go out? There's a child sitting alone in the corner of a crowded playground. While other kids run and scream and chase each other in the noise and chaos, she sits quietly with a book. Her teacher watches, concerned. Why doesn't she play with the others? The teacher approaches. Don't you want to join them? The child looks up, confused. But I'm happy here. The teacher smiles uncomfortably. But you need to socialize. It's important. The child closes her book slowly. She doesn't understand why being content alone is treated like a problem. She walks toward the group, but something inside her already knows. The world will always try to fix what was never broken. This is what happens when a child learns that loving solitude means something is wrong with them, that staying home is antisocial, that preferring peace over noise makes you less than. But here's the truth they never tell you. What if loving to stay home isn't a flaw? What if it's actually a profound psychological trait that shapes how you experience love, work, and meaning? And what if understanding this could finally set you free? That's exactly what we're about to discover. Not everyone who loves staying home is the same. The reasons are vastly different. Some are pushed there by life. Others are pulled by nature. Some find their purpose there, and others simply find their peace. Understanding which type you are changes everything. Because once you see yourself clearly, you stop apologizing for who you are. You stop forcing yourself into spaces that drain you, and you start building a life that actually fits. So let me introduce you to the 4 types of people who love staying home. As I describe each one, pay attention to which one resonates, because recognition is the first step toward acceptance, and acceptance is the first step toward freedom. You might see yourself in one, you might see yourself in all 4. That's okay. We're complex, we contain multitudes, but somewhere in these descriptions, you'll find the mirror you've been searching for. The one that reflects back not what's wrong with you, but what's actually deeply right. The first type, those who've been pushed home by life itself. Maybe you've survived a brutal job, one that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Maybe you've endured toxic relationships where you constantly performed, constantly adjusted, constantly shrank yourself to fit someone else's expectations. Maybe you've simply lived in a world that never stopped shouting, never stopped demanding, never stopped taking. And so you retreated, not because you're weak, not because you're antisocial, but because your nervous system, in its profound wisdom, said, enough. Your home became your sanctuary, not a prison, not an escape, a sanctuary, a place where you don't have to explain yourself, where you don't have to be on, where you can finally exhale. People call it hiding, you know it's healing. People call it avoidance, you know it's survival. This isn't laziness. This is your body and mind protecting themselves from a world that forgot how to be gentle. And that's not something to fix, that's something to honor. You may still enjoy socializing, but only after you've recharged. Only after you've remembered who you are beneath all the noise. Because when you're out there too long, you start to lose yourself. And coming home isn't retreat, it's return. Return to yourself, return to center, return to peace. But not everyone is pushed home by circumstance. For some, staying home isn't a response to trauma. It's a fundamental need, a biological truth. This is the second type. These are the true introverts. For them, being home isn't just preference, it's necessity. It's how they maintain mental and emotional equilibrium. Social interaction, especially the demanding kind, doesn't energize them, it depletes them. Think of it like a battery. Extroverts charge by being around people. The more social stimulation, the more alive they feel. But introverts, they run on a different system entirely. People drain the battery. Solitude recharges it. This isn't shyness, Shy people want to connect but feel afraid. Introverts simply have a different relationship with stimulation. Too much input, too many voices, too many faces, too many expectations, and the system overloads. The result? Exhaustion, irritability, that desperate need to be alone. Scientists have studied this. Introverts have higher baseline cortical arousal. Their brains are already humming with activity. Add more stimulation and it quickly becomes too much. It's not preference, it's neurobiology. So home for the introvert is where they restore their inner battery. It's not that they hate people, they've simply learned that too much of anything, even good things, leads to burnout. And here's what society never tells them. This is not a flaw to overcome. This is a design to understand. The world celebrates the loud, the visible, the always available. But depth requires stillness. Insight requires solitude. Creativity requires space. And the introvert knows this instinctively. At home, they can drop the mask. They can stop performing the exhausting theater of extroversion. They can simply be. No small talk, no forced smiles, no pretending that shallow connection feels like anything other than what it is. Hollow. This is their power, not their weakness. They don't need constant validation from external sources. They've built an inner world so rich that being alone never feels lonely. They think deeply, they feel deeply, they create deeply, and all of that requires one thing the world rarely gives them: silence. So when they say, "I need to stay home tonight," they're not rejecting you. They're protecting their capacity to show up fully when it matters. They're choosing quality over quantity, depth over breadth. And that's not antisocial, that's wisdom. The third type, the creators, artists, writers, musicians, people whose best work emerges not in the chaos of the world, but in the cathedral of solitude. For them, home isn't just rest, it's a laboratory, a studio, a sanctuary where ideas become real. They're not avoiding the world, they're diving deep into their minds without distraction. The noise outside interrupts the music inside. Some of the world's most profound art was born in quiet rooms, alone, undisturbed, because creation requires focus, and focus requires space. Space from demands, space from interruptions, space from the constant pressure to be someone other than who they are in that moment of flow. This isn't isolation. This is immersion. They're not running away from life. They're running towards something most people never touch, the full expression of their inner vision. And then there's the fourth type, those who simply can't stand crowds or noise, not necessarily introverts, just people who find loud, chaotic spaces overwhelming and draining. They don't hate people, they hate the sensory assault, the overstimulation, the feeling of being crushed by too much input. For them, joy isn't found in packed bars or crowded events. It's found in doing what they love, peacefully, without pressure. Home is their quiet sanctuary, where they feel truly themselves. No performance required, no overstimulation endured, just peace. So we've identified the four types. Perhaps you've recognized yourself in one, perhaps in all, but now comes the deeper question: what makes these people truly unique? What do they all share beneath the surface? Because here's what most people miss. Loving to stay home isn't just about preference, it's about psychology, about how you process the world, about what you need to thrive. And when you understand these 6 truths, everything changes. You stop defending yourself, you stop feeling broken, you stop forcing yourself into molds that were never made for you. Instead, you start building a life that honors who you actually are. These aren't just observations, these are backed by research, by psychology, by the lived experience of millions who've spent their lives being told they're somehow wrong for loving what brings them peace. So let's dive deep. Let's explore the 6 psychological truths that define people who love staying home. And as we do, I want you to notice something. How much of your life has been spent fighting against these truths instead of embracing them? The first truth: people who love staying home face relentless social pressure from the moment they're young. If you preferred solitude as a child, you heard it constantly. Go outside and play. Why don't you have more friends? You need to be more social, as if there's something fundamentally wrong with you, as if loving quiet means you're damaged. Society worships the extroverted ideal, the person who's always out, always connecting, always visible. We celebrate the networker, the party goer, the one with 1,000 friends and a packed calendar. But here's what they never tell you. Solitude is not a defect. It's a form of energy restoration. It's legitimate, it's necessary, and it's backed by science. Research shows that people who recharge through alone time actually have better emotional regulation, better mental clarity, better capacity for deep thought. They're not running from life. They're creating the space to engage with it more fully. Choosing solitude isn't rejecting life. It's rebalancing it. You're not broken because you need time alone. You're not antisocial because you find peace in your own company. You're simply wired differently, and that wiring is not a bug. It's a feature. The second truth: people who love staying home are unfairly labeled as lazy or antisocial. But the reality, many are extraordinarily productive and self-directed. They thrive in silence. They build structure in their routines. They create high-quality work without the need for constant external validation or oversight. A 2023 Harvard Business Review study found that people who work in self-controlled environments, often from home, are more effective and less burned out. Why? Because they're not wasting energy managing stimulation. They're directing it toward what matters. And antisocial? That word is deeply misused. Antisocial means disregard for others, cruelty, manipulation. That's not what this is. Wanting meaningful, calm, infrequent connection is not antisocial. It's discerning. It's intentional. People who love staying home often prefer fewer relationships, but deeper ones. They communicate with purpose, not obligation. They're not avoiding people. They're avoiding superficiality. They're avoiding the exhausting dance of small talk, forced smiles, and social performance that leads nowhere. Quality over quantity, depth over breadth, intention over obligation. That's not antisocial, that's mature. So the next time someone calls you lazy for staying home, remember, discipline looks different for different people. And the next time someone calls you antisocial, remember, depth doesn't require crowds. The third truth: people who love staying home often form profound emotional bonds with animals, especially pets. This isn't secondary. It's not a replacement for real connection. For many, the relationship with their pet is one of the most emotionally significant bonds in their life. And science backs this up. The Human Animal Bond Research Institute found that living with pets improves cardiovascular health, reduces stress hormones, and increases dopamine and oxytocin, the chemicals connected to happiness and bonding. Pets offer something rare: emotional consistency. They don't judge, they don't demand performance, they don't require you to be anything other than present. And for people who've spent their lives feeling misunderstood or pressured to be someone they're not, that unconditional acceptance is healing. There's a quiet joy in routine with an animal. The morning walk, the soft purr, the way they wait by the door. These small rituals provide emotional balance that many human relationships can't match. Not because human connection isn't valuable, but because it's often complicated by expectation, miscommunication, and performance. Animals don't ask you to explain why you need to be alone. They simply exist with you. And sometimes that's the deepest form of companionship. The fourth truth: people who love staying home develop fierce, unwavering loyalty to their interests and passions. They don't chase trends. They don't hop from hobby to hobby seeking novelty. They return to what they love again and again, not out of habit, but out of reverence. They read the same author, rewatched the same film, returned to the same creative practice. And in that repetition, they find depth. They find layers others miss. They cultivate mastery. They build relationship, not just with the hobby, but with themselves through it. The American Psychological Association found in 2022 that having fewer but more meaningful connections, including connections to interests and passions, leads to higher long-term emotional well-being. These people aren't retreating from life, they're curating it carefully. Home becomes a container for identity, passion, and emotional depth. It's not an escape, it's an expression. And the fifth of truth, people who love staying home thrive in remote work. This isn't just about convenience, it's transformative. Remote work allows them to control their pace, to reduce distractions, to maintain energy for what truly matters. They're not avoiding effort, they're optimizing conditions. Stanford University found in 2022 that remote workers were 13% more productive and reported significantly higher job satisfaction. Why? Because they work in environments that match their needs. People who thrive remotely have higher self-regulation. They manage boundaries better. They understand their limits, and they protect their energy fiercely. Choosing to work from home isn't about comfort. It's about competence. It's about performing at their best in the way that actually works for them. This isn't laziness. This is strategic self-knowledge. And now we come to the sixth truth, the deepest one, the one that changes everything. People who love staying home possess a profoundly rich inner world. Their solitude isn't empty, it's overflowing with ideas, with questions, with memories, with insight. They journal, they reflect, they read, they create, they listen, not to podcasts or noise, but to themselves, to the quiet voice that speaks only in stillness. Dr. Laurie Helgo, author of Introvert Power, writes, "Solitude is not the absence of energy, but the presence of self." Read that again. The presence of self. In those quiet rooms and personal rituals, many people find the space to heal, to grow, to imagine. Their emotional intelligence is often high, their thinking rarely shallow, their personal development profoundly self-directed. They don't need external validation to know who they are. They've spent years in conversation with themselves. They know their shadows. They know their light. They've done the work most people avoid, sitting with themselves long enough to actually meet themselves. This is not escapism. This is presence. Radical, uncomfortable, beautiful presence. While the world mistakes their stillness for emptiness, they're building entire universes inside. They're asking questions most people are too distracted to hear. They're feeling things most people are too busy to notice. They're becoming people most others never have the space to become. They're not running from the world, they're carrying it inside them. And when you understand this, when you truly understand that your love of home isn't avoidance but depth, you stop apologizing. You stop defending. You stop shrinking. You start owning it. You start building around it. You start living as if your need for solitude is not a flaw to manage, but a truth to honor, because it is. But here's where we need to pause, because there's something we haven't talked about yet, something critical, something that changes everything. All four types share something profound. They've discovered that peace isn't found in noise, that meaning isn't found in crowds, that home can be a sanctuary. But here's the hard truth, the one no one wants to hear, the one that separates wisdom from avoidance. Peace and isolation live very close to each other, closer than you think. And if you stay in peace too long without movement, it silently, slowly becomes loneliness. The comfort that once healed you starts to cage you. The silence that once restored you starts to echo with emptiness. This isn't about forcing yourself to be extroverted. It's not about pretending you love crowds when you don't. It's about recognizing a dangerous line, a line so thin you can cross it without noticing. Because here's what happens, you stay in too long. You stop reaching out, you stop stepping outside. You convince yourself you're fine, that you don't need anyone, that you're complete on your own. And maybe you are, for a while. But then, slowly, things shift. You stop growing, you stop feeling motivated, your world shrinks, your thoughts loop. The comfort that once nourished you becomes the reason you feel stuck. This is the trap. The one people who love staying home must vigilantly watch for. because the line between restorative solitude and destructive isolation is almost invisible until you've already crossed it. Solitude builds your soul, but the world reminds you it's still alive. You need both, not in equal measure, not in the way society tells you, but you need both. You can love your space, you can love your solitude, you can thrive in quiet, but don't let it steal your connection to life itself. Don't let it become the reason you stop moving, stop evolving, stop feeling. Because here's what I've seen happen again and again. People who once chose home as healing start choosing it as hiding. They stop answering calls, stop accepting invitations, stop engaging, and they tell themselves it's because they're introverted, because they prefer peace. But underneath, they're afraid of being hurt, afraid of being disappointed, afraid of being seen, and so they stay, not because they're recharging, but because they're retreating. And that's when home stops being sanctuary and starts being prison. This isn't about forcing yourself to socialize. It's not about becoming someone you're not. It's about noticing when your preference has turned into a pattern, when your peace has turned into paralysis, when your solitude has turned into stagnation. You don't need to go out every night. You don't need a packed social calendar. You don't need to perform extroversion. But you do need to step outside sometimes. Even if it's just a walk, even if it's just sunlight on your face, even if it's just a brief conversation with someone who feels safe. Because balance isn't about being more social. It's about staying alive, staying connected, not just to people, but to life, to movement, to possibility. Home should be where you rest, not where you hide. And the moment you feel the difference, the moment you realize you're not recharging, but retreating, that's the moment you must step back into the world. Not all the way, just enough to remember you're still part of it. So how do you find balance? How do you honor your love of home without letting it become isolation? How do you protect your peace without losing yourself? It starts with honesty, brutal, uncomfortable honesty with yourself. Ask, am I staying home because I need to recharge? Or because I'm afraid of something out there? Am I choosing solitude? Or is solitude choosing me because I've stopped choosing anything else? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary. Because self-awareness is the only thing standing between healthy solitude and destructive isolation. And once you've asked those questions, once you've been honest with yourself, then you can start building the balance. Not the balance society demands, the balance you need. Here's what that looks like. Not rules, not prescriptions, but principles, guidelines, a framework for staying connected to both your inner world and the outer one. Because you're allowed to love your space. You're absolutely allowed. But you're also allowed to need more than just your space. And holding both truths at once, that's where freedom lives. First, you're allowed to love your space. You're allowed to prefer solitude. You're allowed to find peace in your own company. That is not something to apologize for, ever. But don't let it steal your connection to life. Step outside sometimes, not because you have to perform extroversion, but because your body needs sunlight, your nervous system needs movement, your soul needs to remember there's a world beyond these walls. It doesn't have to be big. A walk around the block, sitting in a park, a brief conversation with someone who feels safe. That's enough. That's connection. That's life. Second, home should be where you rest, not where you hide. Rest restores you. Hiding depletes you. And you know the difference. You feel it. Rest feels like relief. Hiding feels like fear. Rest makes you stronger. Hiding makes you smaller. So notice. Notice when you're resting and when you're retreating. And when you catch yourself retreating, don't shame yourself. Just gently, kindly, step back out, even if it's hard, even if it's uncomfortable, because growth lives on the other side of comfort. Third, you don't need to force yourself to be social or loud or constantly available. You don't. Society's expectations are not your responsibility. You're not required to attend every event. You're not required to maintain 100 friendships. You're not required to pretend shallow connection feels fulfilling. What you need is balance. Moments of peace and moments of aliveness, solitude and connection, stillness and movement, not in equal measure, in the measure that works for you. And that measure, only you can define it. Not your friends, not your family, not the voices that have spent years telling you you're wrong. You. So listen to yourself deeply and build a life that honors both your need for solitude and your need for life. Because here's what I want you to understand, what I need you to hear. If you've ever felt that your preference for staying home makes you strange, makes you broken, makes you less than, know this: you are not broken. You are paying attention to what your mind and soul actually need. And that's not weakness, that's wisdom. The world will always try to make you feel wrong for loving what brings you peace. It will call you antisocial, lazy, avoidant. Let it. Because the people who matter, the ones who see you clearly, they understand. They understand that your quiet isn't emptiness, it's fullness. They understand that your solitude isn't loneliness, it's presence. They understand that your home isn't a hiding place, it's a sanctuary. And sanctuaries are sacred, so take care of your space and it will take care of you. Honor your need for solitude, protect your energy, build your inner world, but don't forget, every once in a while, to step outside, to feel the sun, to hear a voice that isn't your own, to remind yourself that life is still happening and you're still part of it. Because solitude builds your soul, but the world reminds you it's still alive. You need both, not in the way they tell you, in the way that's true for you. So here's my invitation. Stop apologizing for who you are. Stop defending your need for peace. Stop shrinking yourself to fit a world that was never built for people like you. Instead, own it. Build around it. Live as if your solitude is not a flaw to fix, but a feature to celebrate. Because it is. You are not broken. You are not antisocial. You are not lazy. You are someone who knows that true peace doesn't come from noise. That depth doesn't come from crowds. That meaning doesn't come from constant movement. You are someone who's learned to be at home with yourself. And that, more than anything, is a kind of freedom most people never find. Take care of your space and let it take care of you.